I lost 30 pounds without trying. I didn't know if I had cancer.
You've worked with thousands of people. You tell me sometimes you've looked at like 5,000 different oats and GI maps and stuff, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, I know I'm in the top 10 worldwide, according to the lab, running the most labs. We start fixing her gut. She had parasites and bacterial overgrowth, which 8 out of every 10 people I test do. So we give her some dysbiosis herbs. All of a sudden, her back pain goes away. After a year of support with your team, after revisiting with our specialist, my son no longer qualifies autism spectrum diagnosis or disorder.
Right. So you've seen many children by treating the gut, detoxification, binders like chlorella, like you were saying, improve their behavior, and they were previously on the autism spectrum.
If you're not testing, you're guessing. For 1/5 of the cost of a fancy cold plunge, you can get a really good functional medicine workup that's going to show so many biomarkers that you've never seen before.
Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast, guys. My guest is Evan Brand. He's a functional nutritionist with over 15 years of experience. He has seen thousands and thousands of gut tests and oat panels and mycotoxin tests. He tells me in this podcast that he's one of the top 10 providers in the world in terms of the number of tests that he's done. So enjoy this podcast with Evan. He's a very, very knowledgeable functional nutritionist and has a lot of functional medicine labs. In this podcast, I want to talk to him about different labs, how you can get these ordered, what kind of symptoms you might have that might spur you to get these labs. We'll give you actionable tools to actually get these tests and think about how to use them in your life. And we will give you lots of information that you've never heard about Botox and empathy and orgasms and motorcycles and cancer and gut microbiome and parasites and worms in your poop. On to the podcast with my buddy, Evan Brand. Evan Brand, thanks for coming on the podcast, man.
Paul, hey man, glad to be with you.
Good to see you. We got matching pants, but we'll see. It didn't intend that, but anyone watching the video will see. Are those linen?
These are linen, yes sir.
These are linen too. All right. We will talk a little bit about polyester clothing and the dangers of polyester clothing on this podcast, but I wanted to have you on to talk about functional lab testing because this is really interesting to me. As a medically trained doctor in medical school, 4 years of medical school, 4 years of residency, I was never taught about how to evaluate the gut flora, how to look for parasites, how to look for mold toxins, how to look for Lyme and co-infections, how to look for pesticides, how to look for toxins in the environment. And we've known each other for a long time, and we've had a lot of conversations about how these tests make a huge difference. When somebody goes to see their doctor and they get blood work, they're basically getting a CBC, a complete blood count, a chemistry panel, and they might get a lipid panel. And that's it. And there's so much more there. So we're going to talk all about that on this podcast. We're going to talk about the kind of testing that you do with people as a functional nutritionist, right? You're a board certified functional nutritionist.
Yep.
And how many years have you been doing that?
Well, I'm 13 years into the podcast, but about 10 years into the clinical practice. So I was in a brick and mortar, and I started helping the patients in the brick and mortar so much that the doctor I was working for was getting mad because he's like, dude, you're getting my people so well, they don't need to come back in for visits.
Did he really say that?
He did. He said, you're literally affecting these patients because I remember one particular older lady, her back, it was mainly back pain, okay? So he was treating her. He was doing some decompression therapy. He was doing x-rays, putting her on these different supplements like food grade stuff. And all of a sudden, we look at her gut and we start fixing her gut. She had parasites and bacterial overgrowth, which 8 out of every 10 people I test do.
That's insane.
So we give her some dysbiosis herbs. All of a sudden, her back pain goes away. And she's like, hey, doc, I don't need weekly visits anymore. I'll see you in a month. So a month passes by. He gets the front desk lady to call her. Hey, we haven't seen you in a month. What's going on? She's like, I'm fine. And so she had this, what I suspect was some sort of radiating pain from the gut wrapping around, creating issues with the back. There's probably some level of kidney involvement as well. But I was like, okay, well, what I'm doing is working. And so a decade ago, I went out full 100% telemedicine a decade ago.
And so you work with people from around the world doing these type of tests.
Yeah.
That's
everywhere.
amazing.
Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, even in Kenya, we've had supplements delivered to Ecuador via a donkey for last mile delivery.
No, you didn't.
That's what they told us. The client told us. They said, hey, we got it by a donkey. They're like off a dirt road.
Oh my God.
I can't verify, but that's what they told me.
Oh yeah, that's incredible. All right, so let's start with gut testing and we'll break this down for people. Before we do that, I've got some gifts for you.
Thank you.
Everybody that comes on the podcast gets gifts. You got some air-dried steak from Lineage. You got some protein powder from Lineage, which you already ate yesterday.
Yes.
You already opened that. You already opened this and you were sitting in my house yesterday and you were like, hey, I need some protein powder. And I said, I've got this. I'm going to gift it to you tomorrow. But there you go. And then Lineage nose-to-tail collagen, which is something we just came out with.
Yeah, I was going to say I haven't seen it on the website.
Yeah, that's the new one.
Okay.
And then got to give Heart and Soil some love here. We got some Heart and Soil dick pills. Those are, that's whole package testicle pills.
Thank you. I need a honey.
Oh, yeah, we'll get you some of that too.
Okay.
We'll get you some of that too. But those are your gifts for the podcast. We'll put them here. So let's start talking about gut testing. We're talking about GI map primarily, right? So quantitative PCR, gut testing. And my friend Gary Brecka was recently on Rogan, and he was talking about parasites. Whenever I tell people that I eat a lot of meat, they always say, aren't you worried about parasites? Especially when I tell them that I occasionally eat raw meat. So let's break it down. Like, what are gut parasites? Should people be worried about them? How do you test for it? And what is dysbiosis? How do you test for it, and how do you fix it?
Sure. Yeah. Well, when most people say parasites, we were talking about this yesterday. It's like people think they're going to see a worm in the toilet, like this scary foot-long creature. How did this live inside of me?
Right.
And we have seen worms. So you will see worms come out. Typically, if we're adding mimosa to the protocol, you will start to mobilize some worms. Yes, it is an herb. Technically, it's a seed. It's a mimosa pudica seed, and that will help mobilize worms. So we have, I have an inbox full of hundreds of pictures of worms and weird stuff. Literally people with, knife and fork cutting apart their stool to send me photos for me to identify. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a parasitologist, but I'll try to help. And we have seen some weird stuff. But typically parasites, they're microscopic. You're not going to see them. And I had these years ago. I lost 30 pounds without trying. I didn't know if I had cancer. I didn't know what the hell was wrong with me, but I was freaking out. I went to the GI specialist. They want to do a barium swallow. They want to do a chest x-ray, all this conventional testing, right?
To look for a GI cancer in the stomach or the gut. Yeah.
Or ulcer or something like that, right? And so, of course, they say, Evan, you have IBS. I'm like, okay.
Some catch-all term that means nothing.
It's junk. And so fortunately, I was able to get a GI map test done that back then it was 3 samples. Okay. So if people complain about doing 1 sample, a decade ago, it was 3 days of collecting stool. And that's where I discovered I had not only H. pylori, but 2 parasites. I had Cryptosporidium and Giardia. Now my history, I love being out in the water. I love being out in the river, the lake, creeks, streams, and all surface water in the United States. This is not a tropical disease issue. You don't have to go to Mexico. You don't have to go to Costa Rica to get these bugs.
Right.
Trust me, Giardia is live and well in the US, and I had those bugs. I lost 30 pounds. I couldn't gain weight. I was eating grass-fed meat by the pound, and I was trying to hit the gym, and it didn't matter because I had these bugs. So what are they? Typically, they're microscopic pathogens, but it's very rare to just have parasites in isolation. Typically, it's going to be bacteria, and it's going to be yeast or fungal issues as well. My opinion, this is my analogy. If it sucks, tell me. I'll come up with a new one.
All right.
But my analogy is you've got a nightclub, okay, and you get exposed to a toxin. It's a virus. It's a bacteria. It's a parasite. It's maybe E. coli, okay? You had some bad food. The back door is now open. Maybe you had mold exposure in addition to that. So the back door to the club is open. All these other bad guys get invited to the club. And so the bouncer kicks them out, but you don't clear 1, 2, 3 other root causes there. So the back door's stuck open. And so this is why people, even if you get to a naturopathic doctor who says, hey, I'm going to treat you for dysbiosis, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, another generic term that's not very helpful because it's more important to know what specific strains of bacteria you have because you can use different herbs depending on what bug it is. But let's say you go to the naturopath and they say, Paul, we're going to treat you using oregano oil. Oregano oil is the sledgehammer of natural medicine. It's going to come in and it's going to decimate pretty much everything there. You're probably going to have die-off. You're probably going to have diarrhea, and you may actually do some good with it. However, there may be some bugs left, and then you spin your wheels. And so this is the thing I see. People,
some bugs left that are pathogenic.
Yes, absolutely. And so usually it takes 1, 2, maybe even 3 rounds to fully clear someone's gut. In a way, it's almost a whack-a-mole game at first, depending on how many layers of infection there are.
Okay. Now, so what we're talking about here, I'll just clarify for listeners. We talked about worms, right? Very few people have worms when they think of parasites. I've heard of it, though, in Costa Rica. I have had friends who have taken mimosa, and they do look in the toilet and they're like, wow, there was a big worm in there. But as we were talking about, it's mostly like Central America. It's rare in the United States. I've not seen worms necessarily on GI maps. You've done a lot more of these than I have. I don't do this anymore, but I did a little bit for a while. And so most people think parasites. They think, oh, I've got worms. I got a tapeworm. Most people don't have that. It's rare, but it does happen. Mostly the parasites we're talking about are things like Cryptosporidium, Blastocystis, which we'll talk about, Giardia, which you were talking about there, H. pylori plus minus. And you can see all these on like a GI map test. And what we do for this is you or a functional medicine practitioner sends you a kit. You do this sort of, interesting experience where you poop in a fry basket, then you scoop your poop into a vial and you send it off for analysis. They spin it down and they do use PCR. So they use polymerase chain reaction to amplify the DNA in this sample and they try to identify organisms, usually this Cryptosporidium, Blastocystis, H. pylori, Giardia, by DNA sequences that are specific for those organisms. They do quantitative PCR and they amplify. So one of the things we'll do on the video side of this podcast on YouTube is we'll put in a sample test so people can see what we're talking about. Can we do that? So,
yeah, absolutely.
So we'll do a sample test here so people can see on the screen at this point, if you want to watch the video, of what a report on a GI map might look like. And you're saying with the nightclub analogy that sometimes when one bug gets in, other bugs can kind of come in because it's all this, it's almost like it's a community thing. It's all based on the relationships of these organisms in your gut. And when one bad thing comes in, sometimes other bad things come in. So you're saying when you have these parasites like Giardia or Cryptosporidium, you can also get bacterial issues, which is the term dysbiosis. Am I right so far?
That's right.
And then dysbiosis is a term that I see thrown around a lot. I see dysbiosis very commonly. And then you see symptomatically people have this term SIBO, like we talked about, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And dysbiosis, SIBO, these are all kind of synonymous. They're all kind of non-specific, but what you're talking about is using herbs to potentially address these both parasitic and bacterial improper overgrowths. Am I correct?
That's right. Let's talk H. pylori and antibiotic resistance, because this
before
is
we do that,
deal.
Can we talk about herbs versus antibiotics?
Sure.
Why would you not want to use an antibiotic? Because I agree with you that I think that herbs are better, but Western medicine, which number one, Western medicine doesn't test for these things, right? Yeah. They're going to do a stool, ova, and parasites by microscopy. Western medicine, mainstream Western medicine, doesn't do quantitative PCR DNA testing of stool that I've ever seen. You go to a board certified gastroenterologist and they're going to say, you don't have anything in your gut. We looked at a stool, ova, and parasites, right, by microscopy, mostly. They might do an ELISA, which is an enzyme-linked immunoabsorbent assay, but it's not as specific or as sensitive as a quantitative PCR. But if they find something in your gut, Western medicine is going to treat it with an antibiotic. They're going to use a gun, like, I don't even know what they would use, metronidazole for Giardia or Cryptosporidium. Herbs versus antibiotics for gut stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, they may use nystatin or itraconazole.
If you have a fungal issue.
Yeah, if you've got like a yeast problem, which like I said, typically it's parasites, yeast, it's fungal, it's all these, it's honestly, it's a big colony, as you mentioned, like a community of bad bugs. And some argue it's like this terrain theory and you have to strengthen the host, right? So if the host has mold toxicity, which I did, I built the house with my wife, we got exposed to mold. I was a weakened host. I was immune compromised. And we'll give also for the video, we'll give a chart from the lab that shows all the different mechanisms of mold toxicity and how this actually shifts you into a more immunocompromised state, including TNF-alpha, interleukin-6. There's lots of inflammatory cytokines that are created by the exposure to these airborne toxins. And the EPA estimates that 85% of commercial buildings, potentially even the building we're in right now, could have mold exposure. And therefore, you're breathing this stuff in everywhere you go. And if genetically you don't detox well, it builds up, therefore keeping immune suppression low, meaning you and I go out to eat together, we get a nice steak. Maybe your immune system's better than me. Maybe I pick up a bug and you don't, or vice versa. Now, back to the antibiotic question. So there's damage to the mitochondria, and we can measure this on the Krebs cycle metabolites on an organic acids test, which is something else we want to introduce to the audience.
We'll talk about that too.
So this is a urine test that can measure mitochondrial function, and typically we'll see elevated succinic acid. This is number 24 on the OAT test. We always look at that. And someone who's done antibiotics, they're always going to be elevated, indicating there's mitochondrial dysfunction. What does this mean symptomatically? Well, it's chronic fatigue. And so a lot of times people will go in and they'll go for Cipro. This is the new scary one.
It's a bad one.
Yeah. People are getting floxed, okay?
Ciprofloxacin. This is a fluoroquinolone antibiotic.
It's terrifying what I'm seeing, because these people are going to Mayo Clinic, they're going to Cleveland Clinic, all these prestigious hospitals that are supposed to fix them. And then I see the protocols from there and I'm like, oh my God, that's what they did? So it's amoxicillin, it's a fluconazole, it's potentially Cipro, or it's rifaximin, okay? I don't know why, but doctors love rifaximin for SIBO.
They do.
And here's what it does. It's going to knock the load down. Let's just role play. Let's say your dysbiosis, which there's a competitor lab who they actually give you a 0 to 10 score on your dysbiosis, okay? So this other lab, I've seen cases where the dysbiosis is a 10. This is someone who has massive irritable bowel syndrome. They've got chronic fatigue. They have diarrhea, constipation alternating, anxiety, depression, skin conditions, so eczema, rosacea, and this can happen in young children as well. Rifaximin will come in and take the 10 and drop it to a 6, but now you've damaged the mitochondria. So now they're more tired. They potentially have nutrient deficiencies. because all the good microbes that are helping us to make B vitamins in the gut, we actually make nutrients in our gut. It's not just like take a multi. No, we have a multi-factory in our gut that can make nutrients. However, when you have dysbiosis, meaning too many bad guys, not enough good guys, this whole cascade of energy production falls apart.
Right.
And so, long story short, has antibiotics saved people's lives? Yes. If I were dying, I would certainly do antibiotics if I had to save my life. But the CDC even admitted, this is almost a decade ago, they put out a paper and they said we are now in the post-antibiotic era of civilization because there's so much antibiotic resistance happening to these pathogens. They've evolved. They're smarter than us. You come in with this single mechanism drug and all of a sudden the bug evolves and evades that. Just like a guy running from the cops, okay? He takes this off ramp instead and the bug's like, hey man, we outsmarted you. We're going to keep going.
It does happen a lot.
So what do? More antibiotics. In fact, H. pylori in conventional gastroenterology a decade ago was treated with triple therapy.
This is true.
3 antibiotics at the same time.
3 antibiotics.
And guess what the new H. pylori, 2025 H. pylori treatment is? Quadruple therapy. And guess what? It's not working. We're seeing these people that have been treated with quadruple therapy. They now have RA because they developed
rheumatoid arthritis.
Yes. Because they had Prevotella infection. So Prevotella is a bacteria we can measure that triggers RA. There's a whole category of autoimmune disease triggering bacteria that we can measure. So Citrobacter is a bad one, Proteus, Prevotella, Klebsiella. So anyone watching with Hashimoto's, these are the bugs you have to look at. So you'll go in to get treated for H. pylori, which 51% of the world population has. Very contagious bacteria. Can easily pass it by sharing cups, sharing spoons. I've had
kissing.
Kissing, yes. My wife had it. My youngest, my daughter had it as well. Hey, daddy, can I have a drink of your water? Oh, sure, sweetie. And then boom, just like that. And then she's complaining of stomach pain every day for a year. So luckily I ran her labs and there it was, H. pylori. So you'll go in for one thing, you'll try to kill it, and now you've opened up the door for other bugs. And they move in, and then before you know it, you've got 3-4 autoimmune diseases.
So many of the antibiotics we talked about, ciprofloxacin, I didn't know about rifaximin in the mitochondria, but many of these antibiotics, metronidazole, potentially have toxicity at the level of the mitochondria, toxicity at the level of the Krebs cycle or the electron transport chain, and you can see this on an organic acids test. So we started out talking about the GI map, which is the quantitative PCR stool test, and we're going to finish talking about that. The organic acids test we'll talk about later. It's one of the ones I want to talk about in this podcast, but we're kind of foreshadowing that, saying, oh, on the organic acids test, you can see some of these Krebs cycle intermediates, specifically succinic acid. And when that goes up, you're thinking, okay, that's mitochondrial function. That's not as good. And so I think that your answer is great. Like, antibiotics are very powerful and they can have a lot of side effects that people often don't think about in Western medicine. So is it fair to say that that herbs are going to be sometimes a longer course of treatment, but are hopefully going to be more easy on the person that's taking them long-term? Maybe not as mitochondrial toxic, easier on the human?
I'd say that's fair because if you were to come in with a heavy antibiotic, for example, doxycycline, okay?
That one, you hear stories all the time of people having long-term side effects from doxy.
And you know what's wild is they're prescribing doxy for acne. You go to a dermatologist, okay? Instead of looking at your gut and figuring out why do you have malabsorption of your fats, you have elevated steatocrit, you have low pancreatic elastase, you have low secretory IgA, indicating your gut barrier is compromised, okay? Intestinal permeability. We got to call it that because I have a GI doctor friend. If he watches this, he's gonna get pissed off if I say leaky gut. And I'm gonna say, dude, leaky gut's in PubMed now, but we'll use your GI doc term, intestinal permeability. Okay. So you'll take doxy for your acne, but you're destroying your gut in the process. And so it's very unfortunate. But yeah, I would say on average, let's say you took doxy for 14 days, right? That's a typical course. Herbs, it might take 3 months, but it's gentle and you're going to feel better. And the cool thing about the herbal meds, I mean, I've been playing with this stuff since I was a teenager. I mean, you're talking 15 plus years. I've been trying different things to help myself. This was all a self,
It usually is.
Yeah.
My story is the same way.
Yeah. And so, for example, like olive leaf, okay? Olive leaf is an incredible compound, beautiful tree. I've got one in my front yard. I love them. And olive leaf has not only antiviral properties, but it also has antimicrobial properties. And so that's the fun thing is that you could see a client that has Epstein-Barr virus. They've got long COVID. They've got other issues, residual viral particles in their body. olive leaf, there's published literature on the antiviral properties of that. But we were also using it for antifungal as well. So that's the cool thing, is that when you're using a blend of 6 or 7 different herbs, you may be killing parasites, bacteria, yeast, fungal, and knocking viruses down all at the same time.
There's some sort of natural intelligence there. And I think Western medicine is starting to realize this. What's interesting to me about this herbs conversation is it does remind me of sort of this carnivore conversation. I've often said, plants, vegetables they're more medicine than they are food. I think some people can eat vegetables just fine if they ferment them or they cook the heck out of them, but these are the vegetable parts of plants. These are extracts from the leaves or the stems or the roots that we're using in these herbs, whether it's oregano leaf or olive leaf or, walnut bark, things like this. These are sort of the vegetable parts of plants, and they do have medicinal use. I've been pretty clear about this in the years that I've been thinking about how humans can eat and live to be the most healthy, and said, it's not that I don't like plants. It's just that I think that these plants do have defense chemicals. And sometimes we can use those defense chemicals for the good. Sometimes those defense chemicals can be leveraged as medicines. And this is generally the way that hunter-gatherers use them. When I was in Tanzania, the Hadza at Lake Eyasi in Tanzania, they don't eat leaves unless they're sick. They use it as a medicine for like a diarrhea or something. They don't eat salads. They use roots of plants to make poisonous arrows for their bows. They use plants as medicine, not as food. And we've seen this even in Native American cultures. So they're using vegetable parts of plants as medicine, not necessarily food. They're saving the animal meat, the organs, and generally the seasonal fruit and the honey for food. That's their preference. Every once in a while, they do go to the other parts of the plants, but it's clearly later on. It's clearly their fallback food. So that's just an aside, that these plant foods are powerful and they have a lot of use for us. And there's a long history of humans using herbs in this way. This is the history of Chinese medicine, right? This is the history, Ayurveda uses it in the same way. So humans have figured this out for a long time, and it's interesting that it's still alive. It's just Western medicine doesn't use it in the same way. Let's get back to the GI map. So we talked about some of the bugs. You were about to talk about H. pylori and I distracted you. So let's talk about that. Maybe talk a little about Cryptosporidium, Giardia. I just want people to I know that this podcast is going to feel overwhelming to people. And I know that in an hour and a half or however long this podcast is going to be, guys, you're not going to be able to walk away from this podcast to do a GI map and treat yourself. You're going to have to work with Evan or somebody like this. But what I want you guys to know from this podcast is that these tests are out there and there are other ways to treat these issues that don't have the same side effects that Western medicine does. And I wanted Evan to share some of the stories that he's gone through and some of the success stories he's seen. So we can give some high level on some of these bugs and then we'll move on to like an ode or something. But let's kind of like tie a bow on the GI map here for people.
Mm-hmm. So first, what I'd like to do is just talk about symptoms, because we've kind of glazed over that so far. We're getting too geeky and not covering baseline symptoms. So for folks listening and you're like, okay, what would I be noticing if I had XYZ condition? Okay, so this could be H. pylori. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to work from the north and we're going to go all the way down south to the anus. Okay. We're going to go mouth to butt right now. Okay, so in terms of your mouth, you could have a white coating on your tongue. I know tongue scraping has become a very popular phenomenon. You have these girls day in the life and they're scraping their tongue first thing in the morning. If you have that level of oral thrush going on to where you have to scrape your tongue on a regular basis, that's an indication there's likely something further south in your GI that's going wrong. And you're basically doing the same thing as putting Lamisil on your fungal toenail. Okay, you're treating the surface by scraping your tongue. Now, you could have issues with heartburn. So let's move on to the throat, okay? Now you have esophageal issues. Possibly you've been diagnosed with GERD. Maybe you've been diagnosed with silent reflux.
GERD is gastroesophageal reflux disease. So people get the reflux. They get heartburn, burning. Yeah. Very common.
Yeah, so it could be heartburn and, PPI medication. If we were to just look up PPI medication sales, this is billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's not beating out oncology drugs. Cancer drugs are the #1 most profitable drug on planet Earth. I have a family member who used to work in big pharma who would sell cancer drugs. The markup on those is insane. But moving on to the throat, if you've got reflux or you're noticing you have issues with your voice, I've worked with different people that have voice issues. I've worked with guys out in Hollywood who say, man, I'm a singer and I can't sing because my voice is so messed up because I have acid reflux. So let's move further south. Now,
you and I both know somebody that has that.
Yeah, and it's getting better. We're doing a great job.
Yep.
So you have a sphincter down here at the bottom of the esophagus. Okay, this is called your LES. This is your lower esophageal sphincter. Now, typically this sphincter is supposed to open up like a gate. I was on the drawbridge this morning watching a cool boat go by. So when the gate opens, food goes in and it shuts. Now, when you have excessive stress, when you have H. pylori, when you have potentially a hiatal hernia, all of a sudden, this is not working properly. The valve's getting stuck open. Then you have this reflux disease. And that's why you could have silent reflux forever and ever and ever. Now, moving into the stomach, you've got H. pylori. 51% of the world population has it.
Right.
It damages what are called the parietal cells, P like Paul. Parietal cells secrete HCl. This is hydrochloric acid. This is incredible for us. We want an acidic stomach. The reason that turkey vultures don't get sick when they're eating a raccoon that's been on the side of the road for a month is because they have the most acidic stomach of any creature on planet Earth that we've ever studied. Their pH is around 1, incredibly acidic. Now, for a human GI, it's going to be around 1.5 to 2, and that's great.
Still very acidic.
Very acidic. So much so that if you were to be able to open that up and pour it on your shoe, it would melt your shoe.
More acidic than wolves, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. Humans have a very acidic gut, a very acidic stomach. But
that's
I don't
cool.
Want to,
I don't know the wolf pH, but I know the turkey vulture is like supposedly the most acidic. Now, if you have H. pylori, your stomach acid levels are decreased. Now, Dr. Jonathan Wright did an amazing book called Why Stomach Acid is Good for You, and he goes into all sorts of different literature about nutrient deficiencies, osteoporosis, skin conditions, autoimmune diseases that all stem from hypochlorhydria, which is a technical term for low stomach acid.
Right.
Now, like I said, I had H. pylori. This is why I couldn't gain weight, because now your food is just sitting there. It's not digesting well. Then you go into the small intestine, okay? You've got small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. You get treated with rifaximin. Maybe your doctor did a breath test, okay? A hydrogen or a methane breath test. I'm not a fan. Why not? Why not? Well, because you can do a GI map and I can tell you what bugs you have, methane or hydrogen, sure, but I'd rather know the bugs because then I can connect the bug to your disease.
Right.
Then we go further south, we go into the colon. You've got potential pancolitis, you've got ulcerative colitis, you've got Crohn's disease, you've got just generic IBS or irritable bowel disease. You've got potentially rectal prolapse. You've got anal fissures. You've got hemorrhoids. So, I mean, you see nose to tail how bad this thing can dysfunction. And so when you're using specific herbs, you're basically fixing nose to tail.
Over time. So we had, I love that. Thank you for sharing all the symptoms. So we had basically thrush, which is basically a candidal overgrowth in the mouth. So you can see fungal symptoms in the mouth, reflux at the level of the stomach. You can see hypochlorhydria in the stomach, which is indigestion or burping, bloating, the reflux, like we talked about, the SIBO, the dysbiosis, gas, bloating. You can have pancolitis, inflammation in the gut, irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease. And I think that oftentimes gut stuff, like you said, can also manifest as things like back pain, fatigue, skin issues can be related to gut stuff. So lots and lots of different manifestations of gut issues. I basically think that most people that I come across who have any sort of health issue should probably get a GI map. You probably should do a quantitative PCR test of your gut. Even insomnia can be related to this.
Oh, 100%, man. So when I had parasites, I had insomnia. There's some discussion. I mean, how do you prove this? I don't know. This is just a clinical observation, okay? But people that have parasites report that they're waking up around 3 a.m. Now, Chinese medicine argues, okay, this is possibly the liver, some other like Ayurveda, some argument about kidney function possibly being related. So when I had mold toxicity, I would wake up literally 3, 4, 5 times a night to go pee. It was miserable. How are you going to get good quality restorative sleep if you're waking up 3, 4, 5 times? I felt like I was dying. And then once I fixed my gut bugs, also I still sometimes wake up. Okay. I think, I don't know, if y'all are out there and you're watching and you sleep 100% through the night, send me a screenshot of your Oura ring that proves you don't wake up once and I'll send you a free gift, because I think most people have this. They have some level of issue. Now, you've got potential for histamine. So that's one thing we didn't cover. Okay, so let me add that to the mix.
Yes.
Histamine issues are related to your gut bacterial dysbiosis. Now, I'm a big proponent of a low histamine diet. In fact, I think
in general,
because
all right, guys, just want to pause the podcast for 1 minute to tell you about our Heart and Soil whole package. You heard me in the podcast joke in the intro that these are dick pills. They're not really dick pills, but they do have testicle in them. And if you look at the reviews on this product, it's incredible. So many men have found benefits from hormonal health, libido, erection. There are a lot of satisfied wives and girlfriends out there. The science is out there, guys. It's pretty fascinating that organs benefit the corresponding organ. I take whole package every single day in my smoothie. It has testicle, liver, and blood. If you're a man and you want better performance and you want the benefits of organs and you want the nutrients and the peptides and the microRNAs in organs, check it out. This is one of our best-selling supplements. Most people I know who take this love it. So whole package. You can find all of our supplements at heartandsoil.co. We make a women's supplement called Her Package, but check us out. Back to the podcast.
I think most people are so immunocompromised from fragrance exposure, from pesticide exposure, heavy metals, whether that's from silver fillings in their mouth, whether that's
silver mercury amalgams.
That's right. So a silver filling in your mouth is approximately 51% mercury.
Yes.
There's a whole conspiracy about that. You can look up a video called The Smoking Tooth. This goes back to the 1800s. They knew how toxic mercury was way back then. So that's a whole tangent for another podcast. But the reality is, with trace amounts of heavy metals, pesticides, all these different things going on, our histamine levels are much, much higher. And a lot of people now are being diagnosed with what's called MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. And this has happened way more in the last 5 years since the virus and since the injection. Therefore, I'm going to bring it back home. So stay with me. If the bucket is full of histamine already and you go for avocado, overripe banana, papaya, mango, kiwi, strawberry, these are all high histamine promoting or histamine liberating foods, and you could potentially have a rash, you could have brain fog, you could even have dizziness.
Fermented foods, what are other high histamine foods? Fermented foods, kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir can even be high histamine, right?
Absolutely. And processed meats, which I would love a grass-fed hot dog, but it's a processed meat.
Salamis.
So, yeah, salamis, pepperonis, sausages.
Aged meats.
Yeah, super aged meats. Oh my God. Did you see, I think it was a piece of fish or a piece of meat. It was so aged. It was this viral video. It was literally covered in mold. And the dude was slicing it while it was covered in what looked like aspergillus. And they were like promoting it like it was cool and trendy.
I've seen some dry aged steak that is literally covered in mold, and they cut off the mold and then they serve you the steak, and it has a different flavor. But if you have histamine sensitivity, that is probably going to be triggering for you.
I will pass. I will pass. So the point is, all the stuff we're talking about, this big bucket of bacterial issues, dysbiosis, plus environmental toxins, okay? And we've measured that on you several years ago, and we could do it again if you want. But everyone has something, whether it's trace amounts of jet fuel from traveling, whether it's car exhaust because you don't have your recirc on when you're sitting in traffic, whether it's potential rainwater contamination. I have some people that are watering their garden from their rainwater. They did a study out in Rocky Mountain National Park. Even rainwater samples in the middle of the mountains had glyphosate.
Jeez.
And we know glyphosate in parts per billion can damage beneficial microbes. So if you're not eating 100% organic, try to go that direction, because these trace amounts of pesticides are also worsening the dysbiosis. And so if we measure a stool test and then we measure a chemical test, the people that have the worst guts, the lowest levels of lactobacillus, which is one of our keystone species, they have the highest levels of glyphosate. So we can directly correlate those two pieces of data together. Elevated glyphosate equals deficiency in lactobacillus, which is a super important strain for your overall gut health.
Did you see what's happening in Iowa right now? Monsanto is putting up billboards saying that if we limit glyphosate, the farmers will collapse. Like, they will hurt the economy in Iowa because the farmers need to use glyphosate to promote the U.S. economy. It was, wait, what? Like the amount of chicanery, the amount of, sort of voodoo hand waving that Monsanto is trying to do right now in the wake of serious pressure against glyphosate is insane. And that's just an aside. So yeah.
No, let's hit this though for a second, because one terrifying image is a US glyphosate map. I've seen one, I think it was 2020 was the latest one I've seen published, and it shows the USA map, and it shows, okay, this is the creepiest part. It shows the millions of pounds, like per square mile. Like it's a color-based map, and it shows the intensity. Obviously, Iowa is in the middle of the corn territory, the soybean. And
maybe we can put that on the screen on the video. We can put a US glyphosate heat map on the screen. If you guys are watching the video, hopefully put that up.
And I've seen massive infertility in those places. I don't market myself as a fertility expert, but clinically, I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of healthy babies through the practice. I've only had 3 of my own, but hundreds in the clinical practice, because these women
clarify that.
Yeah, because these, you got those doctors that are like putting sperm out to the public.
That's not what we're talking about.
Right. So women that come to me and say, hey, I went to the fertility specialist, it's IVF is the prescribed treatment, it's 20 to 30K, and it's not root cause, right? And so when we see these infertile women in the prairies, right, in the corn and soybean in their backyard, they always have elevated levels of pesticides, and we know these are teratogens. These are damaging. So even if the woman does get pregnant, there's a potential for birth defects. And this shows up in wildlife as well. I interviewed Stephanie Seneff, she's a glyphosate researcher, and I talked with her about it, and she told me that, well, she sent me the literature on even deer and other wildlife having birth defects from having babies out in these cornfields that are being sprayed with glyphosate.
In Iowa. Yeah, it's scary. It's scary stuff. And at this point, I just want to take a breath and let people say, or just say to people, don't get overwhelmed. Knowledge is power. Know better, do better. What Evan is talking about here is very important to consider, which is the idea that a lot of us carry some level of low to moderate toxic load. Some of us have a high toxic load, and those are usually those of us that feel very bad or have a lot of fatigue or major issues. But most of us carry low to moderate toxic burdens, whether it's heavy metals, like you said, exhaust fumes, glyphosate. There are toxins in our environments, fragrances. We're in Miami right now. I spend most of my time in Costa Rica, but I have this new mission to make Miami a hub of health stuff. And every time we go into a building, in the lobby, they're now spraying perfumes and this kind of garbage in the lobbies in Miami hotels to be chic and cool. And there's actually one development in Miami that I'm going to consult with, and we're going to make it as healthy as possible. I'll tell you guys about that in a future podcast. But I want to do something in Miami where we get all these perfumes out of the lobbies, or at least make sure they're essential oils and not endocrine disrupting. But the larger point here is that we are exposed to fragrances. Every time I take an Uber, Evan, I have to play Uber roulette now.
Let me tell you this. I did a petition on change.org over a decade ago because I got in an Uber. I think it was actually in Miami. I think it's been a decade since I've been in Miami. And my wife and I, we had our first daughter with us. Okay. So we got a baby that's being forced to breathe this stuff in. I asked the driver, dude, why does your car smell so strong? I don't see any visible air fresheners. He said, oh, I did what's called a car bomb last night. And it's apparently this thing that literally like explodes in the car and puts fragrance everywhere. So I did a petition on Change. It got thousands of signatures to ban air fresheners in Uber, or at least give us the option on the app. Give me a little toggle switch,
yes.
fragrance free.
Fragrance free.
Come on.
It drives me crazy. I end up paying more for Ubers, and I will do it. I will get the Uber Premier or the Uber Premium in hopes that the nicer cars don't have the things hanging from the rearview mirror. And they still have things in the vents sometimes. They're just black, or they're disguised. But I've been in a lot of Ubers where I'm rolling the window down. It's 20 degrees out, and I'm just sticking my head out the window and trying to get fresh air. I don't even like to take Ubers anymore because of this. Anyway, so fragrances are all around us. And Evan's larger point is that we all have some low to moderate toxin load. So this was originally a conversation about histamine sensitivity and the idea that for a lot of us, it's probably worth a trial of a low histamine diet. This is akin to what I've talked about in the past. If you have health issues, sometimes it's worth reducing your vegetables a little bit to see if some of those defense chemicals in vegetables are causing issues for you. But there are lots of resources online about high histamine foods. You talked about many of them. Bananas, kiwi, mangoes. I didn't know were high in histamine.
I've got a free guide we can
Strawberries.
give people.
Yeah, great.
Maybe we could put a link because it's some of the research I've got from the holistic nutrition books I've read, but then some of it's personal trial and error because there's even some spices that people argue are low histamine that I would react to. So cinnamon, that's a high histamine. And so if you see people like, hey, I'm going to do butter in my coffee and MCT and coconut oil, and then I'm going to add cinnamon, that's a histamine promoter. So cinnamon can be an issue. And so we'll give people the link if we can. It's a free guide. It's just a PDF that shows low histamine. For example, blueberries, amazing choice. Strawberries, high histamine. And by the way, most contaminated fruit in terms of pesticide exposure.
Right. Blueberries are pretty high in pesticides too. You want to get those organic also. But yeah, it's a tough world we live in. And again, the intent of this podcast with Evan, the intent of all the podcasts that I do is not to make life impossible for you to live. The intent is to give you knowledge for you to use that knowledge as you would like. Knowledge is power. Know better, do better. Use the knowledge as you see fit. Don't get overwhelmed. Any step in the right direction is a step that's improvement. And I think that as you guys start to make small steps in the quality of your diet, in the quality of your sleep, and your light exposure, things I've talked about on other podcasts, your life will get better. And then you can decide where you put the toggle switch in terms of how far down the rabbit hole you want to go. You don't have to get as intense as I am or as Evan is, but if you have issues and you want to try and fix them, I want to give you tools. We want to give you tools and places to start. So don't get overwhelmed. Knowledge is power. Know better, do better. Use as much of this as you want and discard what is not doable or feasible for you at this time. So
can I give you a positive news about toxicity though?
Yeah.
Okay. So I test a lot of children. Half my practice is children. I love it because I'm a dad. And so I love working with kids, you know, these kids that are defiant in school, these kids that have emotional behavioral issues, they're on the verge of getting kicked out of school. Well, we'll see 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds that have higher toxicity than 80-year-olds. Now, here's the secret that the 80-year-olds are doing. Sauna.
Wow. Okay.
I've seen these guys that are 80 years old, and you would think, wow, these guys are from the 1930s or 40s. How do they have less chemical toxicity, less gasoline additives, less jet fuel, less xylene, less phthalates? How do they have less of that? Because yes, in their youth, that stuff didn't exist. I mean, glyphosate really wasn't starting to be introduced until the 70s. And so if you grew up in the 1940s, like my grandfather did, I mean, his handshake is stronger than mine. Like men's hand strength is getting weaker. That's a tangent. But I look at these older guys and I'm like, how are you this clean on paper?
You've been on the planet for 80 years.
80 years. And they're cleaner than a 3-year-old. And the answer is sauna. These guys are sweating. So it's incredible, our potential to detox. So I know maybe some of this is heavy for folks. I'm used to it because I talk about this all day, every day. But if you feel like this is heavy, I see people in the comments, it'll be like this. The top comment will be like, well, let's just like curl in the ball and die.
Yeah, I give up.
Let's give up. It's like, no, all this stuff that we're talking about is empowering. So please try to like reframe your mindset on this. This is actually incredible data that we can find on you to give you answers, and answers makes you feel less anxious. There's nothing worse than having chest pain at 3 a.m. and wondering, are you having a heart attack? And then it turns out, no, you just had POTS. You had some sort of postural tachycardia syndrome. You got up to go pee and you felt like you're going to faint because you had some mineral imbalances that led to, let's say, blood pressure dropping. So when you get that data on yourself, you feel better. So please don't be like boggled down or like you just want to give up. That's not the goal.
Yeah, but that's great to hear that sauna is that helpful. I think that sweating every day is critical. One of the reasons I like living in tropical places, even if you don't have a sauna, you can just go in the sun for 15 minutes and go for a jog or go for a walk or do something to actually sweat and move some of that out of your body. But that's incredibly powerful. And I think in terms of sauna, my only input here would be like, don't overdo it. Don't cook your brain. 185 degrees in like a Finnish sauna for 15, 20 minutes is probably great. You don't need to do 220 for an hour and absolutely crank yourself, right?
Honestly, sensitive folks, they probably need to start at 125 to 130 degrees for 5 to 10 minutes.
Smaller.
Yeah, because when I first started using sauna, I had severe vertigo. And that's because mold toxin can be stored in your fat. And so when you heat up your body, you're mobilizing these toxins. And so I remember one night, and by the way, I was very stimulated. I couldn't sleep. So I know some people say, oh, sauna at night helps me relax. Well, maybe if you're cleaner, but when you're toxic in general, as you mobilize metals and whatever stored in your fat tissue, non-stick forever chemicals, I mean, who knows what else in there, PFAS, right? But I would get very stimulated and I couldn't sleep and I would feel kind of woozy. Now I can do a sauna. Yeah, after a sauna. And now I feel great. But if I take a binder, I produce a binder that's a blend of charcoal, clay, and some fulvic minerals. If I do that beforehand, it's basically the catcher's mitt to grab onto the toxins that you mobilize. Now you can also do glutathione beforehand to increase the excretion. But if you're very sensitive, that might make you feel worse. So you got to kind of tiptoe into these things. But glutathione and binders are very powerful tools in addition to the sauna.
So a binder before the sauna.
Yeah, get it ready. Get it ready. It's the catcher's mitt. It's sitting there ready. And so as soon as you start mobilizing toxins, you're going to be able to grab on and flush it out through the stool as long as you're hopefully pooping every day or pooping twice a day.
Yeah, you got to make sure you're pooping because if you're not pooping and peeing, you are not moving that stuff out of your body. This is phase 2 detoxification. It puts it into the poop and the pee. Somebody sent me something the other day. What do you think about urine therapy? And I thought, I don't think I want to drink my urine. This is where all the toxins are supposed to be going. No, I'm not into urine therapy. Yeah. You don't eat your poop. I suppose people do fecal transplants after the poop has been very carefully checked, but that's a whole separate thing. But most of us, it's not a good idea to eat your poop. It's not a good idea to drink your pee.
I agree. I'm glad you brought that up because I see videos that get sent to me all the time. Like, Evan, please do a video on this. And I'm like, okay.
Urine therapy?
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I test mycotoxins, pesticides. I mean, we see 2,4-D, which was used in Agent Orange in Vietnam to defoliate the trees.
In urine?
Yes. That shows up in the urine. It's like, I don't want potential trace amounts of 2,4-D in my body. I mean, this stuff is such a potent toxin to the body. Dicamba, which is another very commonly used pesticide used on corn, that shows up in the urine. So this idea that you're healing yourself through, I don't get it.
I don't get it either. The other thing I want to mention is that on my YouTube channel, I recently put out a video about methylene blue. I'm not a fan, guys. And if you want to learn about methylene blue, you can hear about why I'm not a fan of that. There are some people who are using a methylene blue protocol where they were taking methylene blue and then sitting in the sauna or sitting in front of the red light. And I don't think it's a good idea. I'll say that and I'll refer you guys to the methylene blue video. Let's move on to mold because we talked about mold as a trigger for sort of opening the door to the nightclub and letting bad guys in. So you mentioned a lot of buildings are mold toxic, but it's pretty easy to test for mold, right? So how could somebody test for mold?
Several ways. It depends on your budget. If you only have $3, great. You can get an agar Petri dish plate and you can set it out for an hour, and you can see after an hour you put the lid on, and if you want to send it to the lab, it's $30. If you want to just put it in a dark cupboard for a few days, you can do that. And as you I'm getting pretty good at it. I've seen thousands of these, but I can almost tell you specifically what mold it is, and you can count the number of colonies. So this is in combination with ENT doctors and several other in the mold community. There's a whole community of medical doctors that I believe it's called ICEAS. This is like International Association of Environmentally Acquired Illnesses, okay? And they do these summits, but it's all these doctors that specialize in nothing but environmental illness, aka primarily mold toxicity. And so these doctors will recommend a combination of Petri dish testing, which is on the cheaper side, and then it goes into the more expensive stuff like what's called a HERTSME or an ERMI, and they give you a health score on your home.
So this is testing the home environment now, not the person.
That's right. That's right. So if you're testing your home or your car, Mercedes-Benz did a recall on 2.5 million cars because of mold growing in the HVAC systems of the vehicle.
What?
So I'd have these women.
What model was it?
I don't know.
I don't have a Mercedes.
I don't know. But I had a woman that would say, hey, every time I get to work, I have a headache by the time I get to work. So I ruled out the easy stuff. Okay, is it dehydration? Do you have air fresheners in your car? No, it was a Mercedes.
This is funny. I'm going to mention this. I got to talk to my real estate agent. So I'm in Miami. I want to get a place here. I want to have a foothold in the United States. I'm still going to spend most of my time in Costa Rica. The other day I was driving around with my real estate agent, and afterwards I had a horrible headache. And I don't know if it was his car or one of the units we went to look at, but I don't get headaches like that, Evan. So, and the guy, my friend who's traveling around with me, he also had a horrible headache. And so we were saying, like, what did we get exposed to? Was it his car? Is there something in the HVAC system? He was driving a Range Rover. So it's interesting because we're supposed to go out looking at houses again or condos again. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to go in his car.
You just roll the windows down. You'll probably be fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. It can happen in cars.
Yeah. So I work with a pharmacist to formulate a fogging solution that's made of lime, lemon, grapefruit, and tangerine oil. He's this kind of wild dude, and he tested a bunch of different oils and tested them against mold to see what would work. And certain ratios made the mold worse, and certain ratios made the mold better. And we've got thousands of case studies of not only homes, but also school buildings. So luckily, my kids, their teachers are really cool. They know what I do, and they allow me to fog the school building once a year. And when I do that, one of the teachers came to me. It's a male in his 40s, and he's got incredibly terrible allergies. He got off his allergy medication after we fogged the building. He's like, I don't know what you did, but I don't need my Claritin anymore. I'm just fine. And so you can do Petri dishes. And then you mentioned mycotoxin testing in the urine. There's a couple of labs that do that. There's some what's called antibody testing via blood, where basically it's going to show if you have antibodies to aspergillus or what's called Stachybotrys, which is black mold. I prefer measuring the mycotoxins, the mold farts, because that's what you're breathing in. Okay, so basically it's this competition. The reason that we get sick from mold is because there's a battle. So let's role play. Let's say behind this beautiful acoustic wall here, there's a water leak and we don't know it. That is a perfect place for mold to hide because it's behind this paneling. We're never going to see it. And that's felt too. So that might even get absorbed in there. Now, aspergillus might start growing on it, and then another, say black mold, is like, hey, I want that. I want that wet drywall. I want that cardboard. I want that whatever.
Right.
And they off-gas mycotoxins to basically battle each other. We breathe it in. So these are incredibly tiny, 50 times smaller than a mold spore. But you can fix it. You can get it out.
Okay. So the mold, that's how you can test for mold. And if you have mold toxicity, you almost certainly need to work with a practitioner to deal with this.
It's hard. I mean, I think it would be very rare for someone to I was completely debilitated. I couldn't drive for 2 years because I had such severe vertigo. And also for folks with mental illness, I mean, this is a little heavy here, but this is a real story. I went to a Barnes & Noble with my wife, and I see mold growing out of the vents. I'm like, okay, we got to go home. I'm done. Like, once you get triggered from it, you become more sensitized to it. So your amygdala actually grows in size and sensitivity. This is the part of the brain that determines whether something is a fight or flight response or not. And as you get exposed to mold, not only can you become chemically sensitive, which is why I'm completely fragrance free, but you can also become sensitive to those molds. So we're in this Barnes & Noble. I get a weird dark feeling. I'm like, we got to get out of here. And on the way home, I remember it like yesterday. We lived out in the country. There's a huge tree on the side of the road. And I just wished that my wife would drive us into that tree for no good reason. I thought, I've had a great life. Be nice to hit that tree right now. And I kind of snapped out of it. I'm like, what the hell is this? And so I started asking around some friends of mine that work on mold, and they're like, yeah, man, suicidal ideation is totally related to mold toxicity.
Wow.
And so I've seen this. I had a guy in Florida, 21-year-old guy, wanted to end it. Luckily, we found it. We got rid of the mold. He no longer wants to end his life. So if you're that deep in the hole, please seek help.
Yes, suicidality is very serious. Please seek help and understand that, I mean, a lot of mental illness, a lot of mental health stuff is related to neuroinflammation, which can be connected with food. It can be connected with nutrient deficiencies. It can be connected with toxin exposures. All this kind of stuff is likely very fixable if you're willing to get help. What have you seen? Let's talk about this with mold, then we'll move on to like an OAT test, the organic acids test. What have you seen as the most effective therapies for mold treatment? It's a tough one.
The cheapest and free one is avoidance.
Okay.
You got to get the hell away from it.
That's the first step always. You got to get away from it.
Yeah, because, I mean, look, I can make you a perfect protocol. Let's say you're colonizing your sinus cavity, which you probably are, and then you're going to be colonizing your gut as well. So if I give you herbal antifungals in your gut, well, I didn't fix your sinuses. And so this is why ENT doctors that treat mold, they'll do bag spray. It's an antibiotic nasal spray. I'm not a fan. I prefer herbs. There's a natural nasal spray you can use, which I do when I travel, by the way. I'll hit it after the airplane. So, but you have to avoid and get out of the source. So I had a family in Pennsylvania. It's a mom. She works for the federal government. She's got 6 kids. Dad's a cop. She's in federal government. 6 kids. Everyone in the family is symptomatic with some sort of health condition. They had a tree where the roots got so big it busted through the basement. And so every time it rained, they had water in their basement. I put them on a protocol, but the rate of exposure was so great that the rate of detox I could do was only a third of that. And so maybe they stop progressing into further disease. We know mycotoxins are carcinogenic. They're nephrotoxic, so you'll end up with potentially kidney disease. They're definitely hepatotoxic to the liver, definitely toxic to the ovaries. They're definitely toxic to the sperm motility, sperm quantity. Even the testicles get damaged from mycotoxins. So this is a full system-wide issue in this family. But because they were still in it, I'm like, you got to get out. Or you got to fix your foundation. And so you could go and you could do all the biohacks you want, all the friggin' sauna you want.
You got to get out.
You got to get out of there. And there's actually a mold avoiders map, which is interesting. These are self-reported mold illness patients that have reported where they feel good and where they feel bad.
Okay.
And you can look and it's color-coded. Most of the people feel the best out west. Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah. In Florida, got a lot of moisture here.
There's a lot of moisture here.
If you're not running dehumidifiers, chances are high you're going to end up with a mold growth problem even without a plumbing leak.
So I got a condo here in Florida now. I got a condo in Miami. And I was able, because it's still being built, I was able to have the contractors put in mold-resistant drywall.
Yes.
So that's interesting. We'll see. We'll still test it when I get the condo.
I think what that is, I think it's a magnesium oxide instead of a typical gypsum drywall, and it may not have paper on the back. Because see, most drywall has paper on the back. Perfect food for mold.
They love it.
So I think you're really wise. And then the other thing I think we should do is make sure you have, if possible, if we can somehow connect a whole unit, like a whole condo dehumidifier to your HVAC system where it drains itself out your AC drain line, that's better. But a standalone unit would be okay. But the problem is you got to dump those.
Yeah, which is okay. You can do it like a dehumidifier.
Yeah, but if you're gone, it's going to fill up while you're gone, and then who's going to dump it every day?
Right, I'll have to have somebody taking care of it in the unit. But there's at least mold-resistant drywall that you can build if you're doing a new build in a condo. I'm sure you could do it in a house too. It's a little more expensive, but that was something that I was thinking about.
That's smart. It's worth it. So your question
Florida's common.
So your question is, what's the best way to get rid of mold?
Yeah, what have you seen work in terms of a protocol? Just high level.
Yeah, so avoidance, get away from the source, number 1. Number 2, the solution to pollution is dilution. So if you are actively in a mold problem, open up a door, get fresh air as much as you can. Even a 10 to 20 minute recirc of the air like that can clear things out and make it better. Step 3, it's going to be start taking binders at a gentle, low dose. It could be activated charcoal from bamboo or coconut shells. This is not biochemically reactive, meaning if someone's concerned, oh, I have a coconut allergy, it's so far removed. This stuff is roasted. It's not going to give you like an allergic reaction if you're allergic to coconut. So these binders work like, let's see, you grew up in Virginia. I grew up in Kentucky. Did you ever have that lava rock as a kid in your landscaping?
No.
Okay. Well,
I know what you're talking about.
Okay. So those lava rocks, that's basically how binders work. It's not a magnet. It's not an absorbent with a B. It's an adsorbent with a D. So it's not a sponge. People think it's like you just mop up the toxins like a sponge, but it doesn't work that way. It's like this lava rock on a microscopic level. So the toxins get stuck in these little pores and then dragged out through the gut.
Right.
But if you have intestinal permeability because you've been living on gluten and dairy and processed foods, or you just have dysbiosis, even people with perfect diets can still have a leaky gut. So if the gut barrier is open, you got to be careful with the binders, but you can gently do those. And there's a great book called Toxic by Dr. Neil Nathan. I've interviewed him on my podcast several times. He's an MD who's been treating mold for like 30 years. I think he's retired now. But when I talk with him, he basically said, Evan, the world is the way it is, toxin binders for life.
Really?
Yeah.
Everyone toxin binders for life.
That's what he thinks.
Interesting. And it's something I've experimented at night before I go to sleep. I try to take them not too close to food because I don't want to bind everything that I'm eating. I mean, when people come into the emergency room with toxic ingestions, we will give them charcoal because it's binding what's in your stomach. So you don't want to take charcoal after every meal. You don't want to take charcoal all the time because you won't absorb some of the nutrients in your food. But I think if you take them away from food, potentially before you go to sleep, it's interesting to think about taking them before you go in the sauna. I hadn't thought about that. But you don't want to take, my impression would be you don't want to take them too much because you can prevent absorption of the things you actually need. But some level of detoxification with the binders is not a bad idea.
I asked him about that because, that's like a big key point. Like people freak out. They're like, am I going to become nutrient deficient by trying to remove a toxin? He said it's a total non-issue.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you're putting in 500 milligrams of charcoal. I mean, it's just a little sprinkle. And we can measure nutrient levels on organic acids testing. So I would see, if I was creating a depletion, I would see, and I'm not seeing it. So I think the pros outweigh the cons for sure.
Interesting. Let's talk about the organic acid test. So this is a urine test. And it's what we can put some of the samples of this on the screen again for people so they see what a sample organic acid test looks like. It's the most esoteric collection of words you'll ever see. It's just metabolites. And really, you have to work with somebody that knows what they're talking about to understand these. But what kind of stuff can you see from an organic acids test?
Yeah. And I've got one here. So we'll probably not put this one on screen just because it's hard to read with the cameras, but we can at least just give people the rundown of the pages because
it might be too complex for the podcast. Yeah.
Okay.
Just tell me what.
We'll go through the pages.
Well, just like what kind of stuff do you see from an organic acids test? What could you gain from that?
Yeah. So page 1, it's all bacterial and fungal infections. So if you have candida, incredibly easy to test.
You can see it on an organic acids test because of the metabolites from the candida.
That's right. So when the candida is metabolizing, it's going to spit off what's called arabinose or arabinitol.
Okay.
Very easy to pick up. If we see elevated arabinitol, boom, candida. If we see hydroxyhippuric acid, fungal overgrowth. If we see tartaric acid, fungal overgrowth. If we see hippuric acid, bacterial overgrowth. So just on one page, 18 biomarkers, you're going to look at Clostridia infections like C. diff, which by the way, kills 30,000 people per year. So in a medical facility, hospital-acquired infection is the third leading cause of death in a hospital. So you go into the hospital to get, an endoscopy for your heartburn, and you leave the hospital with C. diff. We can measure that on the OAT test. You've got mitochondria, so you can measure the Krebs cycle metabolites. My favorite part, as a guy who's loved amino acid therapy for a decade plus, neurotransmitter metabolites.
Okay.
90% of people we've tested have low levels of dopamine, endorphins, so the whole catecholamine family, and serotonin. And this is measured with metabolites in the urine. And so it's called homovanillic acid, or HVA for short.
Right.
You can measure this. And when you talk with someone who is depressed, they're bored easily, they've been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, they have issues with focus and concentration, we can see the low dopamine on paper. I know there's a lot of discussion now about dopamine detox and getting off social media, and psychologists are running TikTok and making you more hooked. I don't know if I can verify. I guess it'd be interesting to see, a dumb phone user, someone that goes back to a flip phone, and see all of a sudden if their dopamine just recalibrates or something. I did see a paper that came out this week where they had people disconnect from the internet for 2 weeks, and they said that there was a massive improvement in their working memory. And there were several other biomarkers in the study, but if you just look up like off internet 2 weeks, you can read the paper on it. But once you get back to the internet, you probably go downhill. But serotonin is super key to measure on the OAT test too, because we have a world of anxious, irritable, short-tempered, short-fused, worriers, pessimists, and people who can't sleep well. and serotonin gets converted to melatonin if you have essential cofactors like B6.
Right.
So when you have low serotonin combined with the next page of the oat, which is your nutrient levels, we can measure all of your B vitamins. We can measure, which I love to measure, riboflavin. We can measure vitamin C, which humans can't synthesize. Did you know goats, they can synthesize vitamin C in such a high level, they can make 100,000 milligrams of vitamin C in a day.
Wow, I had no idea.
There's a book by Thomas Levy called Curing the Incurable. It's literally every disease known to man, whether you're talking measles or mumps, any of these childhood diseases, in the literature dating back to the 1930s about vitamin C helping with these conditions. You hear about scurvy, obviously, the extreme manifestation of this. This is why sailors would travel with citrus fruit to try and prevent that.
Sure.
Liver, you get lots of vitamin C, so shout out liver.
Liver. Meat has vitamin C. Meat is a known anti-scorbutic. One of the things they couldn't do on the long trips across the ocean was have fresh meat, but fresh meat always has vitamin C. But yeah, vitamin C is important. Too much vitamin C can cause issues for people too. So it seems like it's a U-shaped curve.
You'll get bowel tolerance if you get too much.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 to 10 grams would be too much. But in cancer, it's very common to do an IV of 50 grams of vitamin C.
Yeah.
Now your kidneys filter it pretty quick. So it's kind of like you're going to pee. I've done it. You're going to pee relatively quick, but it does help pull you out if you are like actively in an oncology protocol. Talk with your doctor. Obviously, it's not medical advice. If you're on chemotherapy, there's some indications, contraindications with vitamin C IV. And then glutathione. So glutathione's measured on the oat test as well, which is great. And then there's also a toxic exposure marker, which is a general organic acid that's up for a lot of reasons. So you get 75 pieces of data on 1 cup of pee.
It's a pretty interesting test. I've done it multiple times and it's been very revealing for me. So that's the organic acids test. Just want to pause the podcast one more time, guys. You guys know that I'm super proud of what we do at Lineage Provisions. This is my food company. I wanted to build Lineage Provisions to fight back against big food, and we just released a new product. This is our nose to tail collagen. Why is this product better than other collagens? Because it has full spectrum collagen, type 1, type 2, and type 3 collagen, plus hyaluronic acid and elastin from powdered eggshell membranes, plus naturally occurring vitamin C from acerola cherries, plus trachea and scapula cartilage, which has been studied by John Pruden for wound healing, plus sea salt for absorption. I really feel like there is no better collagen on the market. We test all of our stuff for heavy metals, glyphosate, pesticides. It's the cleanest stuff in the world that I could make. Check out our new nose to tail collagen at lineageprovisions.com. And we also make our chocolate protein powder, our air-dried steak. I'm really proud of what we're doing at Lineage. Check us out, lineageprovisions.com. Back to the podcast. Do you want to talk about Lyme and co-infections, or should we talk about some case studies that you've seen?
Sure, we can hit Lyme and co-infections.
Because that's the last one probably, right? We talked about GI map for stool. We talked about mycotoxin testing. We talked about the oat. And I feel like the last one is probably the Lyme test.
Yeah, let's hit it.
So I grew up in Virginia. I'm going to do one of these. I haven't done it yet. But if I have, some sort of Lyme, but there are other infections that can co-occur with Lyme. I don't have symptoms that I'm aware of, but I'm always looking to optimize. I've had tick bites in my life. So it's a urine test, right, for Lyme. And then what else is it looking for? So Lyme disease is a tick-borne illness.
That's right. And just to quickly compare and contrast to Western med, just like we did for GI stuff, okay?
Right.
So typically they'll do a Western blot. It's going to be a blood test. Now, here's the deal. If you're measuring antibodies, what if you have immune suppression and you're not making antibodies to Borrelia burgdorferi, which is a bacteria that causes Lyme? You're going to get a false negative. My wife, she got laughed at when we went to a doctor many years ago after a tick bite. She had a rash, and the dude says, nope, your test was negative. You don't have Lyme. But if you want, I can give you 14 days of doxycycline.
And destroy your mitochondria in your gut.
Yeah. And we said no. So in my opinion, cost effective, easy to do at home. You do some provocation, sauna or exercise, stir up the bugs. You could do a deep tissue massage if you'd like, and then you collect the bladder. And we can see it's a DNA analysis, just like the stool. So it's an amplified result. And we can look at Lyme, but also the co-infections, which unfortunately I've dealt with. And I'm suspicious that you may have some stuff. We'll see just because of your history. There's a website called tickreport.com. People can mail their ticks in after they get bit. And in the US, 51% of ticks in this country have Lyme.
Wow. Just everywhere.
Yes.
There are some hotbeds.
There are hotbeds.
Northeast.
100%.
Where else should people be worried about ticks with Lyme? Or where? I guess everywhere.
I mean, honestly, like anywhere but New Mexico, Arizona, and maybe Utah, you're fine. But everywhere else in the US.
So Mexico, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, not as much, but definitely Northeast where I grew up. New Jersey, New York. This is horrible up there.
Yeah.
Probably Florida here. Definitely Texas has it.
Yeah. I've got a buddy in New Mexico. He's got a ranch. He's got 600 acres down there. I love seeing his trail cam photos of all his deer and stuff, but I get paranoid because a lot of deer are going to harbor ticks. I'm like, when you go hunting, he'll hunt elk, he'll hunt deer on his property. I'm like, do you ever see ticks? No. Somehow he never sees ticks in New Mexico where he is. I think it's due to the moisture levels being so dry there, because ticks like moisture and ticks like being in, for example, leaves. So like I'd go for a walk on my property in Kentucky. We had 100 acres. I'd go for a walk in the woods. I told you yesterday, I'd have 20 ticks on me in a 10-minute walk.
Terrifying, Evan.
And some of them are so tiny. Okay, these nymphs are so small, it looks like a speck of pepper.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to go hiking in New York or New Jersey again, or Kentucky. I love being outdoors. Nature is everything for me.
Amen.
And I don't ever want to be outside in those places. That's terrifying.
I know. So Chris Newby, she did a book. I've interviewed her. It's called Bitten, The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Warfare. There was a doctor named Willie Burgdorfer in the 1950s hired by the U.S. government to work at a lab in Colorado where they forcefully injected ticks with different diseases. And the goal was to see how far they could incapacitate a society or a civilization without killing them. So the goal was to create these bombs full of injected ticks and drop it on Cuba to incapacitate their economy.
Is this real?
This is real. This is all outlined. This is all declassified government documents.
What?
Yeah, you should interview her. Chris Newby. Bitten is the name of the book. And this was also carried out up in the Northeast.
They were going to drop tick bombs on Cuba.
Yes.
What?
I know.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, this is wild. So the question becomes, well, do I have a bioweapon in me, or do I have naturally occurring Borrelia burgdorferi, which is a bacteria that causes Lyme?
Okay.
His name is Otzi. I think it's Otzi. It's he was found in the Swiss
Otzi the Iceman?
Yeah. The Iceman.
Yeah.
So he had Lyme.
Right.
He was a 5,300-year-old mummy that was in the ice, and he had Lyme. So this goes back very far, but I've had Lyme, I've had Bartonella, and I've had Babesia. You mentioned co-infections. So a mosquito, a tick, fleas, and also lice can transmit these. So don't think I haven't had a tick bite, I don't have these issues. A paper in California looked at cats. 51% of cats, and the number was closer to 90% of stray cats tested positive for Bartonella. And Bartonella can cause inflammation in the capillaries. I used to have tingling in my feet. It was Bartonella.
Cat scratch fever.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a song written about this.
Yes.
That's Bartonella. Okay. So now everyone is terrified. We've completely terrified everyone in the audience. There are a lot of pretty incredible transformations that you've seen. Will you just talk about a few of those? And we were hanging out at the house last night. We went and skated at a really cool pump track here in Miami at Hallover Park. And before we did that, you were showing me some micronized chlorella, and you handed it to me and you said, I've given this to kids with autism and seen their symptoms improve. So talk about that a little bit, or just like, I'm curious because RFK Jr. is talking about autism right now. And he's saying that by September, we're going to have this cause of autism. You've worked with a lot of kids with autism, right?
Hundreds.
What have you seen with them?
Yeah. And of course, this is controversial. So I guess I have to hire a bodyguard now.
Okay.
But so there is an influencer in Panama, the country, who reached out to me with her child. He was completely nonverbal. He was around 7 years of age when he first came to me, and he couldn't walk very well without help. He couldn't ride a bike. He was completely nonverbal. Obviously, he was in a special education program, and he was being completely left behind. Unfortunately, the doctors there, the medical system is not prepared to investigate this. So with the labs that we were able to use, international distributors, to get it to him, we found high levels of everything. We found pesticides. We found mold toxin. We found tons of bacteria and parasites. His gut was a mess. He had malabsorption. She sent me a testimonial, which maybe we could, I mean, she's like, hey, spread this to the world. So we could probably literally share her screenshot of her message from Instagram.
Yeah, we'll put it on the screen.
And she said something to the effect of, quote, after a year of support with your team and after revisiting with our specialist, my son no longer qualifies in the ASD, the autism spectrum diagnosis or disorder.
Right.
He can now walk, talk, ride a bike, read, write, and he's no longer in special education. And this is not just one isolated case. This has happened hundreds and hundreds of times. There's a great quiz that we use to help. It really helps me, not even just the parents, but it's called ATEC, ATEC, Autism Treatment Evaluation Checklist. And you can rate your child on a 0 to about 140, I think is where it maxes out. Anything above 100 would be considered severe. Okay, these are the nonverbal. These are the kids that are 5, 6, 7 years old still wearing pull-ups. They're bedwetting. They're having potty training issues. A lot of times there's anger. I mean, I have kids that they're teenagers on the spectrum and the parents have to install like mega deadbolts on their doors because the kids are threatening them, right? Like major anxiety, irritability, OCD, also what's called PANDAS, which is a comorbidity. It's created from a strep infection.
Right.
But yes, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of these cases are being reversed.
So in your practice, you've seen many children, by treating the gut, detoxification, binders like chlorella, like you were saying, improve their behavior, and they were previously on the autism spectrum.
Yeah, and their scores will go from like 100, okay, so that would be a severe case, down to the single digits, which they no longer, according to the ATEC quiz, they no longer fit into that criteria.
Incredible. So from your perspective, it sounds like gut infections, Lyme, mycotoxins, heavy metals, all of these can contribute to kids who are susceptible and make them demonstrate behaviors that are more autistic.
Yeah, you know, I get really frustrated when I see those bumper stickers like running for the cure, like for cancer.
Right.
You know, it's like,
it's disingenuous.
Yeah, or I mean, in Kentucky, it was very popular, which by the way, it's also, there's pesticide impact on the brain. There's papers you could just go in PubMed and put in mycotoxin autism. There's published papers going back to at least 2020 on mycotoxins and autism. So this is in the medical journals. This is not just me clinically seeing this. And it's very unfortunate because you'll see these license plates. This was real popular in Kentucky, autism awareness. I'm all for awareness. However, we got to start educating these people on what are the root causes.
Absolutely.
Because there's not one trigger. If you're like, what caused my kids blank? Let me give you the list.
Yeah.
There's 15 things.
Or more.
Yes.
Or more. And I think that we still need to take a very honest, authentic look at vaccinations in some kids. And I think that's going to happen. And who knows? I mean, I don't think it happens in every child. It clearly doesn't happen in every child. A lot of kids are vaccinated with MMR and other vaccines and don't become autistic. But are there certain children? And in 2025, it needs to be okay to ask this question. In 2025, it needs to be okay to ask this question. Are there certain kids with genetic predispositions that have heavy metal toxicity or mold toxicity who are more susceptible to immune storms or immune reactions in a bad way to vaccinations? Could it be contributing? Absolutely. Do we know it for sure? No, but let's ask the question without being blacklisted. This is crazy.
Yeah, shout out to Dr. Suzanne Humphreys. She just went on Joe Rogan's podcast within the last couple of weeks at the time of this recording. She's a medical doctor who's seen thousands and thousands of cases, and she's essentially a vaccine whistleblower. So check out that video.
Interesting. Very cool. We could talk for hours. I know we've given people a lot of value. Guys, we were not trying to overwhelm you. But even yesterday, we were talking about two other topics that I want to touch on before we end this podcast.
Here we go.
This is crazy. So I said something to you. I've been thinking a lot about Botox. It has nothing to do with the fact I'm in Miami, guys. I'm lying. Actually, it has a lot to do with the fact I'm in Miami, but that's a separate story. So I live in Costa Rica most of the time, and I'm in Miami right now, and I've been thinking about Botox and how is Botox potentially negatively affecting women in our society and men too, because I know a lot of men get Botox. And I've been thinking about it from an empathy perspective because I was doing some research and I was seeing that there's a lot of evidence. Actually, let me rephrase that. I was doing some research and I was realizing there's evidence that when you paralyze the muscles of your face and you cannot use the mirror neurons in your brain as well to mirror the expression of the person you're looking at, that can cause problems with empathy generation. So the idea here is if a woman or a man has Botox in her or his face, and you are having a conversation with a human, your husband, your wife, your children, and they make a facial expression, throughout all of our history as humans, we have mirrored that expression. There are mirror neurons in our brain that mirror that expression. This is how we feel empathy. We know that the way your face moves is connected to the emotions you feel in your brain. And so there's very real evidence that not being able to mirror the person you are partnered with, your children, affects pair bonding and it affects your ability to feel empathy. But you told me about something else with Botox that blew my mind. Talk about that.
Yeah. Let me say one thing real quick about empathy. Did you know ibuprofen kills your empathy?
I did not know that.
I don't know the mechanism, but Ibuprofen kills your empathy. So if you feel like you're like a robot and you're on ibuprofen, there you go. So new literature came out on Botox and orgasms. And
I looked this up.
Yes.
This is crazy.
I'm like, dude, if you don't believe me, come on. And what was it, around 30% reduction in orgasm strength, I believe was the number, the marker that they gave. So imagine 30% reduction in your orgasms. And I would argue,
or not number, but it was like intensity of the orgasm.
Intensity.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Orgasm intensity due to the Botox. And I would argue that there's probably relationship issues that are brewing. I have some friends that are very successful that unfortunately went through divorce and their wives are Botox to the gills. And I'm wondering, is there a relational, like, molecular mimicry, this emotional mimicry you're talking about, is there an issue there too? Is it reduced orgasms? Okay, so she's not as happy in the bedroom and he's like all happy and bubbly to see her and she can't even show her happiness. Is that creating issues in relationships?
It's crazy, Evan. So I was blown away. And so if you guys are not believing this, I'll put a reference on the screen on the video portion. I searched for this. I found a study. It was a small study. It's 36 women, but in the study, there was a significant reduction in orgasm intensity in women that had Botox. They didn't look at men, but that was scary. So you have empathy, potentially also orgasm, decreased intensity. That's horrible. And I have a friend here who's a woman in Miami, and I sent her some of the stuff about the empathy, not about the orgasm stuff. I didn't know about that, but maybe I'll send that to her soon and see what she thinks about that. But I sent her the stuff on empathy because we were having a conversation about it while we were walking one day. And she said, I asked my friends about this, and most of them said, I would rather not have wrinkles. I can express empathy in other ways with my voice, with my facial movements or my gesticulations with my hands and my body. And I thought, holy shit, man. Like most women, I bet, and I think that I'm going to tweet about this. And I think most women, maybe men too, but most women, I'm not trying to be sexist. Let's just say most people that I've talked to would rather not have wrinkles. They would rather not look older, quote unquote, than actually potentially impair their empathy generation. That's crazy to me. What kind of a society are we living in where people would rather not look old than impair their ability to pair bond with their partner or pair bond with their children? The thing that worries me the most is the ability of a human or a mother or a father to pair bond with your child because of Botox. And it's just 3 million plus injections a year of Botox. I think the number is even bigger than that, to tell you the truth.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about that because I love my girls. I've got 3 girls. And my middle girl, she is the sweetest little angel. If I just even smirk at her, she puts the biggest smile on her face ever and mirrors me. I'll just be like, hey. And she lights up. I couldn't imagine not having the ability to light my kids up like that. And also, let's throw this in. A lot of these people that have Botox, they also have breast implants. I've done shows on this, but breast implant illness is a big deal.
It's a real deal.
I interviewed a surgeon named Dr. Robert Whitfield. He specializes in explants, and the stuff he's seeing, there's 100+ symptoms linked to breast implant illness. So if you've got the combo, the Botox implant combo, and you feel like your health is falling apart, you got to investigate.
I had Danica Patrick on my podcast a few years ago and we talked about her breast explants. So she had implantation of her breast. Yeah, she had breast implants, and I did a whole podcast. We can link to it. Guys, if you want to listen to the podcast from Danica a few years ago, I went to Phoenix and hung out with her and talked about it. But yeah, she had some pretty striking things to say about breast implants. And again, look, guys, I'm in Miami. It's real here. Like
here's the devil's advocate, okay? Oh, I do Botox for migraines. Oh, I do Botox for whatever else, TMJ, right? A dental issue or a jaw issue. Okay, why do you have migraines? Yeah. It's not a Botox deficiency. Let's figure out root cause here.
100%. And why do you have TMJ? Like, it's not a Botox deficiency. A lot of TMJ, a lot of temporomandibular joint dysfunction is related to other systemic issues in the human body. What Western medicine does is it silos these. It wants to treat these things as you have headaches. But listen, I know for myself, like I got exposed to something the other day when I was in a car. I don't have migraines. I don't have headaches. And most of you guys, if you're struggling with headaches, if you're struggling with these issues, this is a systemic issue. Get to the root cause, which is why I love what you do. And this is what made me so frustrated with Western medicine that I left. I don't practice Western medicine anymore. I make content like this to educate people. And I think that does just as much good in the world as Western medicine does. I'm not saying Western medicine doesn't do good. I just think that most of our paradigms in Western medicine are badly broken. The last thing I want to talk about with you, again, we'll have to do another one soon, is EMFs. So I had Tristan on my podcast. I'll link to that one, guys. We did 3 hours about light, flickering light, about EMF, RF, and I've been testing my environment. So my audience has heard a lot about RF band, EMF, which is the Wi-Fi band. But recently I've been thinking more about magnetic fields, which is the ELF, so extra low frequency band EMF. So we have ELF and RF. RF is what you're going to get from your cell phone. It's what we're getting from Wi-Fi. But ELF is different. So you told me something that really blew my mind about ELF exposure, magnetic fields. What were you saying?
Yeah, well, there's a book called Motorcycle Cancer.
Okay, this is crazy.
Yeah, and I grew up riding on four-wheelers out in the country. I don't know how much exposure I have. Luckily, my fertility rebounded because there is some discussion about the biological impact on the testes, sperm quantity and sperm morphology and sperm quantity in EMF exposure. There's building biologists talking about this. Dr. Deborah Davis and Martin Paul. Dr. McCullough has been sharing their content for many, many years, but these are amazing researchers that have literally thousands of papers on the biological impacts, more than just your thermal impacts. Now, there's going to be some electrical engineers that are going to watch this and they're going to throw something in the comments. Oh, it's non-ionizing radiation. There's no impact. Look, man, I've had clients that have been so sensitive. I had one lady in Greece. She got exposed to mold. She was so sensitive that she could no longer use a keyboard on a laptop because of the EMF coming from her laptop would give her arthritic-like pain or burning sensations or tinnitus in her ears. And when I was very sensitive, sounds weird, but when I would hold my phone,
oh yeah,
I could feel it in my hand.
I've felt it in my hand. This is RF that we're talking about now too, but you told me that there is evidence, and we can confirm this, that riding on a motorcycle could increase prostate cancer. And again, we're talking about ELF now. We're talking about magnetic fields. What did you measure on? What have you seen measured on motorcycles in terms of the magnetic field?
Even just at an idle, and this is measured in milligauss, so you can get a Gauss meter.
This is magnetic field versus RF.
Yeah, and magnetic fields, by the way, are much harder to shield against.
You cannot shield that I'm aware of.
There is one shielding material that we
really?
could use. Yeah, it's a type of metal. I put it on my house. Yeah.
Okay, so I need metal underwear if I'm going to ride a motorcycle. I don't ride a motorcycle anymore.
So the author of this book, Motorcycle Cancer, the author, he actually came up with a patent, but I don't think he had enough money to make it work. But he was developing a shielded seat that you could sit on to protect you. But even at idle, this author talks about in this book measuring 40 but up to 200 milligauss from a motorcycle. And think about it. You're sitting on top of an engine and you have a lot of sparks going on. He talked about the mechanisms in the book about, he thinks it's related to the spark plugs creating this excess magnetic fields. But there's discussion of potential bone, like lymphoma, prostate issues, and many, many others. So I would read the book. It's on Amazon. You could buy the Kindle and look at some of the literature. Also check out Dr. Deborah Davis. But for me, I mean, and Elon Musk talked about this too, and he went on Joe Rogan about just the dangers of motorcycles, like the death rate of a motorcycle rider versus a car. It's like, they're so deadly. So I'm fine with my e-bike in the woods. Like, I'm content.
You measured the magnetic field for your e-bike and it wasn't anything.
Oh yeah, it was far enough away because it's a rear hub motor. So the motor's like in the back wheel. It was far enough away from my seat. It was a non-issue.
So what we're talking about here, guys, is a magnetic field. What's the name of the meter that people should get?
I like one called a TenMars, TenMars, a TenMars. It's this yellow meter for around $200.
I'm going to get one of these because I was using a tri-field before, but this one sounds better.
And the guy you spoke about, he's a building biologist that you interviewed.
Well, the guy that I interviewed who's a building biologist is a different interview.
Oh, okay.
His is Test My Home. His name's Ryan Blazer.
Okay.
So I have a separate interview. He came to my house in Costa Rica and tested my house for mold and VOCs. And my house in Costa Rica is all concrete block. Good. And it's all open air. So it was a very healthy house. We noticed that a lot of there was plenty of dirty electricity, so the grounding mats went away. And if you guys want to see a video of my house in Costa Rica now, we did a home tour. I'll link to that here. It was really popular. People loved seeing where I lived in Costa Rica. But that's Ryan Blazer. The guy that I was hanging out with recently is Tristan Scott from Daylight Computing. We were talking about RF and EMF with Tristan.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just saying that I didn't come up with these guidelines, okay? But building biology guidelines say that you want to be, especially in a sleeping area, you want to be less than 1 milligauss by your head. Now, I was in a rental house many years ago, 9 milligauss. Got the heck out of there. On a motorcycle, 40 to 200 milligauss. And the author is interesting. He says that there's actually some level of cell excitotoxicity from the EMF, and he thinks that's part of the endorphin rush from riding the motorcycle, that it's actually the magnetic fields that's somehow stimulating the nervous system. And that checks out with what I've heard clinically, because I have people that say, hey, if I sleep by a Wi-Fi router, I have insomnia. So I've been turning off my Wi-Fi for years.
Absolutely.
Just easy. Like, okay, even if we're wrong and this does nothing, wouldn't it be better to not be around something that didn't exist 50 years ago?
Yeah, we're talking about non-native EMF in the magnetic band, the ELF, and the RF band. It's a precautionary principle. We don't know what these things are doing. There is evidence that RF EMF, cell phones, Wi-Fi routers, do damage cell membranes, potentially causing oxidative stress or DNA damage. We need more research. But for people just to just, you know, absolutely say there's nothing here because it's non-ionizing is putting your head in the sand. That's crazy. But I had a clip. I reacted to Elon. Look, I like what he's doing in the government. I think that, you know, government efficiency is great, but he had a clip on Rogan where he said you could make a helmet of cell phones and it would be safe. And I kind of laughed at this and I thought, you're okay. He's a super smart guy. I think he's wrong about that. Don't wear a helmet of cell phones. Don't wear your cell phone next to your junk when it's not on airplane mode. Don't do these things. Don't sleep next to your Wi-Fi router. And I think most people should invest in both an RF meter and test the RF in your house. I've done plenty of content about how to reduce the RF band EMF. Don't stand next to a microwave. You wouldn't wear a microwave on your head, guys. Don't put AirPods in your ears. They have a major, major impact. Yeah. I know you've done content on this too.
Did you get marked as misinformation?
Yes.
Because I did.
Yes.
I got 1 million views on a video where I literally show an Apple Watch and it's 2 million microwatts per square meter, or almost 3 million. The meter that I had, the Safe and Sound, which I believe is the same one you have.
That's what I have.
The meter, you know, it basically pegs at 3 million microwatts per square meter. So I show the Apple Watch, even in airplane mode, there was still a signal, by the way. And then we put it right next to the microwave, gets 1 million views, so many shares, and Instagram misinformation.
FCC says RF EMF is safe, guys. Okay. And just so you guys know, both Evan and I are wearing Oura rings. Neither of us have an affiliation with these guys. I've just been wanting to experiment with my sleep with this. You can put the Oura ring on in airplane mode and it has no RF coming off it because people might ask questions about that. So mine is on airplane mode. I imagine Evan's is on airplane.
Mine's actually not, because I'm traveling and I didn't bring my charger, and you have to put it on the charger every time.
You can do it at my house. I have a charger at my house. Okay, we'll put yours on airplane mode.
Because that's the only annoying part, is that when you need to take it off airplane mode, you got to put it back on the charger. I want like a tap. So guys, I had an opportunity to invest like a decade ago. I guess I should have, but I want like a tap to turn off airplane.
No affiliation with them, guys. It's just something I'm experimenting with.
Yeah.
So I think people should also buy a magnetic field meter and know what the milligauss are, because some cars are very high in this. And I wanted to mention this on the podcast also. Both you and I have tested Teslas. They're not as bad as I thought.
Isn't that weird? Even at the supercharger, it's low. I thought because I've seen videos of people making fun of people sitting in their cars at the supercharger.
Oh, I have to test the supercharger.
It's nothing. I don't know how. It's a non-issue. It didn't increase the levels at all.
Of the magnetic field.
Of magnetic fields, even right at the source. Now, the unfortunate thing about Teslas and most modern cars, though, you are going to get a lot of RF because it uses Bluetooth to connect to your key fob. So that's something you can't get rid of. There is an option to turn off the Wi-Fi in the screen.
Yes.
So I did turn that off, but you have to do it after every drive.
Interesting. Yeah. In my car in Costa Rica, I have the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth turned off. So you can decrease the RF in your car, but you want to know what the magnetic field is in your car if you're driving a lot. One of the guys on my team sent me something about RF. One of the guys on my team sent me something about magnetic fields on planes. And so from now on, guys, you will see me in the back of airplanes because that's where the magnetic field is the lowest. And you were telling me you've measured this. At the wings by the motors, the magnetic field is very high on a plane. So okay, I'm never sitting near the wings again, because I used to sit in the exit rows thinking, oh, this is like cheap first class, right? I get a lot of room. I get to stretch my feet. But if you're by the wings in the exit rows, you've measured this. I have not. The magnetic field is quite high on an airplane. Apparently, the lowest is in the back. There is some magnetic field people have measured in first class or in the avionics of the cabin. So pilots need to be aware of this. But magnetic fields are not something to trifle with. There's very good evidence that kids who are around the high voltage power lines have higher rates of cancers. And I think that's the problem with the magnetic fields is, are they causing cancers? Yeah. And you've mentioned that they're connected with miscarriages and infertility. But if you're sleeping in a house and your bed, most of our beds are right up against the wall. And I guarantee most of you guys listening to this are sleeping within a few feet of an outlet. So measure the magnetic field at that outlet, because you have to know what's going on there. It's really important.
Yeah, two things. So there's a book, a guy named Dr. Samuel Milham. I believe he's still alive. I interviewed him maybe a decade ago. He's probably into his 90s now. He wrote a book called Dirty Electricity and the Diseases of Civilization. And in that book, he talked with specific studies about farmers and how in the 1950s, when farms became electrified, that the cow's milk production dropped. And so he would see that as these farms started to, they'd go from rural to connected, milk production dropped. Also, a new paper just came out on bees, and it has been proven bees visit these flowers near power lines less. So there's actually a reduction in pollination activity by bees near power lines. That's a brand new paper. I literally just read it last week. So put in honeybee pollination power lines. You can read about that. And I'm sure this applies to cell phone towers as well.
Yeah, interesting. So guys, so you know, in the future, I'm going to have a guy on my podcast to talk about bees and colony collapse and honey. So that's coming in the future. So foreshadowing that podcast for you guys. Man, we covered a lot today. Did we miss anything?
Test, don't guess is my whole philosophy. You know, a lot of stuff we said here is stuff that people may not feel that it applies to them. It's easy to hear all this data and just be like, okay, interesting, and just go on with your life. But if you're not testing, you're guessing. So before you go buy a new red light panel, before you go buy your $5,000 cold plunge, for 1/5 of the cost of a fancy cold plunge, you can get a really good functional medicine workup that's going to show so many biomarkers that you've never seen before. And that is the most empowering piece of data that you can get, is your N=1 data. So test, don't guess.
I love that. I totally agree with that. Where can people find you on social media? How can people reach out if they want to work with you? You're going to have a waiting list a mile long, but you're doing good work in the world. So.
I appreciate it, man. So evanbrand.com is the website. Also, I put out daily videos or post on Instagram. It's Mr. Evan Brand, so you can join me there. We try to educate people and just empower. And don't be afraid.
And you have a post on your Instagram. How many views did it get? Like 20 million?
Which one?
About the one that's pinned on your profile about the 4 tests. That's why, I mean, that was one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast, because it got 101,000 how many views did that video get?
I don't know on the views now.
Millions.
It was like 4.6 million in a couple of days, and it was like 110,000 shares, I think, is the last time I checked.
It probably has 10 to 20 million views on that video and 30,000 comments. So basically in that post, you were talking about, hey, if you can do a GI map, you can do an O test, you can do mycotoxins, and you can do Lyme. And there were 30,000 people in the comments saying like, give me some information about this. So I think there's definitely a desire to learn about this stuff.
Yeah, and I've been doing a podcast for 13 years. Dr. Paul's been on there as a guest several times. So check out the show. It's free. It's 13 years in the making. I've had over 500 episodes.
Man, I really appreciate what you do. Thanks for doing what you do. Because when I got started doing this, I was in my residency about 5 or 6 years ago, and I learned from your content when I got started. Because you were doing your content before I was doing this content. You're really an OG in the functional medicine space, and you've helped thousands of people over the years. It's so interesting because I went to medical school, but you didn't go to medical school, and your knowledge just through experience as a functional nutritionist is massive. Like, you've worked with thousands of people. You tell me sometimes you've looked at like 5,000 different oats and GI maps and stuff, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, I know I'm in the top 10 worldwide, according to the lab, running the most labs.
What? That's crazy.
Yeah.
So the accumulated knowledge that you've seen is very valuable. I think that, medical schools should have you come and give lectures to their medical students about these things, because there's not many people that have seen more of this than you. So
I'd be happy to. Here's the funny thing. The labs now are paying me to train doctors. So twice a year, I give lectures to the labs. I just gave one a couple weeks ago to a group of 200 doctors, and they're mind blown. They're like, why didn't we learn about an oat test in medical school?
Right.
So it was fun.
Amazing, dude. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thanks for doing this work in your world. Thank you for doing... We'll cut that out, guys. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Thanks for doing this work in the world. You're helping a lot of people.
My pleasure, man.
Awesome, dude. Thank you.
Thank you.